The time is 6:01 p.m. We will now call the special public meeting of the Board of Trustees of Unville Independent School District to order. A closed session of the board will now be held on the matters contained in the notice for this meeting. Should the board determine that any final action, final decision, or final vote be required with regard to any matter considered in such closed session, then such final action, final decision, or final vote will be made upon reconvening of this public meeting in open session. The time is 6:01 p.m. The time now is 6:35 p.m. We will now reconvene into open session. The next item is public comment. The board encourages comments from citizens of the district or from district employees. Anyone wishing to speak, either as an individual or as a representative of the group, may do so following the procedures outlined on the agenda. The board asks that comments pertain to public education issues and be no longer than 1 minute. Remember, the board may not discuss or act upon any issues that are not posted on our agenda for tonight's meeting. If an issue mentioned is listed on tonight's agenda, the board will defer discussion until the appropriate time during the meeting. In addition, the board has adopted complaint policies that are designed to secure, at the lowest administrative level, a prompt and equitable resolution of complaints and concerns. Complaints brought by students or their parents, by employees, and by citizens may be heard in accordance with the board policies. Each of these processes provides that if a resolution cannot be achieved administratively, the person may appeal the administrative decision to the board as a properly posted agenda item. Copies of our district policies on public participation in meetings and filing complaints are available on the Humble ISD website. Our first speaker for this evening, first and only speaker, Michelle Washington.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Dr. Michelle Washington. 32 years of driving, 8 years as a director, 4 years as an assistant director. The demographics of your transportation department has changed. You no longer employ the elderly that don't need extra, that don't need more. The elderly had supplemental income to support them. After COVID, you have single parents trying to make it, being evicted, cars being repossessed, lives being thrown in a hole because teachers want a week off. You gave them that week off, but you threw us to the dogs. We can't make it with all of these weeks off in a year. 4 or 5 weeks out of salary. We can't do it.
I'm sorry, your time is up, but thank you very much.
Since I'm the only speaker, can I continue?
No, we have a policy, well, not a policy, but we have made a decision this school year to have each public commenter speak for 1 minute. You are able to send us an email with the additional information.
We've tried all of that, and it's not being heard.
I'll give you my email address. Item 4A, personnel recommendations. Mr. Kirchhoffer, do I have a motion?
I move that the board approve the administration's personnel recommendations as presented in closed session with addendum.
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Item 5A, goods, professional services, and non-construction services exceeding $50,000 in the aggregate or $25,000 individually. Mr. Kirchhoffer, do I have a motion?
I move to approve the CH listing of vendors and estimated annual cost for contract awards and renewals for the purchase of goods, professional services, and/or non-construction services that are estimated to exceed $50,000 in the aggregate or $25,000 individually for the 22-23 fiscal year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0.
Madam
Item
President?
5B, approval of RFP number 2021-007R, Educational and Curriculum Subscriptions, Internet and Web Database Access and Software. Mr. Kirchhoffer, do I have a motion?
Madam President, actually, all of the remaining items that are action items for the board are consent items. So if you'd like to
Oh.
take the remainder of item 5, that way Mr. Kirchhoffer can make a single motion on the remaining items.
That sounds great.
The board is,
Okay,
of course,
so
more
we'll-
than welcome
yes.
to vote on them individually, just for efficiency in
So
my
should I skip 5A since we voted?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Item 5B. Any discussion? Seeing none, consent. Item 5C. Approval of RFP number 2021-006R, Educational Service Consultants. Consent. Item 5D. Approval of RFP number 2022-101, Miscellaneous Instructional Materials.
Madam President, I have a question. Where is the one on, which one is that? Is it A? Okay. Reading that, I didn't see, when I opened the agenda the other day, okay, so it's in there?
Mr. Scarfo, it's actually an A, B, and C. Given the parameters, we wanted to make sure we were covering all of our procurement grounds because it's a little bit of all things. A little bit of a
okay.
service, a little bit of a product, a little bit of a software.
Okay, because in the agenda that came out, it was sent us, it actually kind of detailed it and talked about it. So I thought, well, it wasn't there, but, okay. Thank you.
Okay. Item 5D, consent. Okay, Mr. Kirchhoffer, do I have a motion?
Sure do. I move to approve consent agenda items 5A through 5D.
Should we, so 5B through 5D?
5A through 5D? Or we skipping?
We'll say
5A
A
was
because we
already voted
on
upon
it.
by the board.
Yes, so
We did vote on
5B
it.
through D.
5B through 5D.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion passes 6-0. Okay, moving on to our information items for tonight. Item 6A, Budget Workshop. Billy Beatty will present budget information for the 2023-2024 school year.
This on?
There we go.
Good evening, Board. Dr. Fagan, I'm excited to be able to present the initial look at the 2024 budget. We've just began building, and although we're early, we have, and there's a lot of pen.
The screens are not working on our end to see the presentation, Rusty.
I don't know. I don't know if there's a button I can push up here, but.
Well, I think you can probably move forward until you get to some really small writing that
All
we
right.
can't see, and then we may have to pause.
Okay, all right. So let's get into it. Before we get into 2024, I wanted to take a second to show, to think about how we built the current year budget, just because every budget builds on one another. And so this time last year when we were going through and building the budget, a lot of the contributing factors were prioritizing safety and security, and we were facing challenges with hiring. So providing competitive pay was a high priority for us. we were looking at that all the way up until budget adoption. And one interesting thing about when we were building this current year budget was that we had just come out of 2 years of adjustments from the state to help boost ADA that had fallen due to COVID. So we were trying to prepare for that impact where we were not expecting a hold harmless for ADA, and we didn't receive any hold harmless for ADA, so that is still a current concern. But we saw that on the front end, and we were proactive with that. So we also had strong community support and a successful bond election during the budget preparation cycle. And this was, I think I had made a comment last season, was I had to use 2 credit card transactions to fill up my F-250. So we were initially starting to see that things were costing a lot more, and that impact overall on the budget. And then we are opening multiple schools. So I'm happy to present that it looks like we're finishing strong. So even though we encountered some unexpected obstacles with the current year budget, with the lower than expected ADA and enrollment, we're still looking to finish with a balanced budget, and that sets us up nicely as we build the next year budget, that we don't have to account for any deficit in a prior year. So finishing strong with this budget, and a lot of we are always watching every factor that goes into the school year, and really early on we recognized that the enrollment we had projected wasn't quite hitting those marks, and so we paused some of our hiring, and the lower revenue we were going to receive for the lower enrollment and ADA, by us pausing proactively that hiring, that because we didn't need to support the added need there, allowed us to have lower expenditures. So that's really how we got to the balanced budget this year. So before we get into 2024, just wanted to kind of remind everyone of the process. Every recommendation, every request in the budget process is, we're aligning those with district goals. And we use a zero-based budget approach. So we do not give a flat percentage increase to everyone's budget. All campuses and departments submit their requests for new money every year. We review all of those requests, and a lot of times there's budget still available and capacity within their local budget, so it may not make it all the way through the budget process, but we help empower them to utilize their existing budget to still fulfill some of those needs that they had submitted for. So, and then after it makes it through review, at the end of the day, the campuses and departments still have access to 15% of their unused budget to carry forward every year, which allows a little bit more flexibility in that if you didn't, first off, it helps with the end of year, that you're not under pressure to hit a deadline. It allows you to know that some of that's going to carry forward, and also helps to build up a little bit of your own local fund balance saving accounts, so that maybe some larger project, maybe you don't have the budget for it right now, but maybe 2 years from now you can do a more significant one-time type purchase for the campus. So with 2024, there's uncertainty because we're in a legislative year. Every year there's potential changes, but especially in a legislative year. And right now there are a lot of pending bills that amount to dollars for us. So, but we don't know which ones are going to make it all the way through. So we're accounting for everything, and we're preparing our budget for if there was no change to law, current law. But as we move forward through the next couple months, we'll be, hopefully we get some more clarity, and some of those bills make it through the process, and we can align expenditures with that new revenue in future meetings. So Legislative year, we're tracking, we're watching our enrollment. We're still a high-growth district, safety and security, and still, even though there's lots of school finance legislation out there, none of it is changing to an enrollment-based funding model for 2024. There is it looks like there's potentially a baby step towards enrollment-based funding in 2025, the second year of the biennium, where some of our allotments are going to be potentially based off of enrollment. But for 2024, ADA is still the primary driving factor in all of our funding. So that's what we're looking at this year and projecting those numbers, and still trying to be competitive with salaries to attract and retain staff, still watching inflation. And something that we're trying to get ahead of is, you may hear the ESSER fiscal cliff. There was a lot of money that came to districts during COVID. I believe we got around $55 million. And we're watching, we did not put a significant amount towards recurring expenses, but we're trying to watch for that because that money is starting to run out in September of 2024. We won't have any ESSER dollars left. So we're trying to get ahead of that well in advance to make sure that we're not facing a cliff with those dollars.
Yeah, Billy, I think it's important to remind everyone that there are other school districts out there that use ESSER funds for recurring expenses, that when that money runs out, they're either going to have to figure out other revenue sources, cut programs, or cut expenses, and the only way to cut expenses is to cut staff.
You're right. I mean, I would say most use it for recurring expenses. So,
We did a really good job, of not doing that. I mean, I think.
and of that $55 million, we have about $4 million that we're still utilizing in recurring. So, but we already have funding sources to offset that. And by the time we get to next fiscal year, we won't have any. So we will not feel that cliff. Okay, so what is inside the 2024 budget so far that we're working on? The competitive salaries right now, and it's still early, I think, everyone's kind of nervous to show their cards because we're all competing for the same staff, but inside this budget, we're recommending a 3% increase for all staff. We're recommending to continue the $1,000 House Bill 3 or non-House Bill 3 staff stipend that the other side of that, the stipend that we had created for teachers to a couple years ago, we rolled that into base pay. So that is no longer there because it's in teachers' base pay already. But recommending keep that $1,000 stipend going. And then just always comply with all the state mandated TRS retirement increases because there is a lot of pending legislation that could be impacted there. Okay, so the compensation increase, the 3% on average, what that does is it keeps us above market, and it allows us to be 102% of the market. And something interesting, we've made a very strong push over the past few years of making our starting salary very competitive. Right now on the second slide, I show it, but we're number 2 when we compare ourselves to our peers. And so of all teacher years of service, 66% of those years are with Humble ISD. So we are retaining almost 2/3 of our staff on average. And something very interesting that I think is exciting and promising is that of the teachers' years of service with 1 to 5 years of service, 82% of those years are with Humble ISD. So I think you can track that back to when we really started making a push here with our salaries, and that's only going to continue to benefit us, it looks like. So we are number two. If you look at all of our neighboring districts that we compare ourselves to, this is a very early projection. We think that we will stay in second place if we do a 3%, and what we think everyone else will do. This striking distance is, we've almost struck here on number one. So 63,700, to 64,000. So we have gained a lot of ground. But again, this is very early, so we're always watching what everyone else is doing, and this could evolve for us to be able to remain as competitive as we are.
Mr. Beatty, so are these numbers, so have other districts already voted? They haven't voted?
We're looking, but
Okay.
this is our
But this
best
is a
guess at
projection,
what
a guess. Okay, got it.
everyone's
got it.
going to do.
We do stalk them.
We
Yes.
do, we do.
No, I know.
But
And so do
again,
teachers. Yes,
this is,
good point.
like I said, nobody wants to show their cards too early. And like last year, we were tracking that really closely, and then we recognized that we were originally presenting a 3% raise, and as things progressed through everyone's budget process, we realized that 3% was not going to allow us to remain competitive. So that's why we changed that and recommended the 4%, which allowed us to become second place. And so overwhelmingly, families are choosing Humble ISD. We're still fast growth. We are the 6th fastest growth district in the state. And I didn't mention this on the last slide, but Conroe, you may have noticed some of our comparable districts. Conroe and Katy are on there. They're also in the top 6 of fastest growth districts. So not only are we competing with a smaller pool of applicants, but some high growth districts that really need to attract staff to keep up with that growth. So, and something unique about, as I mentioned earlier, is that when we paused that hiring because we weren't hitting the enrollment projections that we originally thought, we have those positions now to be able to not increase this next year's budget, but to utilize those existing positions for all the growth. So you'll notice we are growing, but we're utilizing those positions that we did not use in the prior year to accommodate that growth. So this budget provides for student needs. We are providing the funding to support special education, adding dyslexia teachers, and a pretty significant push. We've had so much success with double-staffed classrooms at the elementary level that we're adding more double-staffed classrooms at the elementary level, and we're also adding a pilot double-staffed math classrooms at the middle school level to hopefully see the same improvement in middle school math as we did in see the improvement in elementary level. And so there's also innovation in this budget. As always, every year we're always innovating. As North Belt Elementary moves into their new home at North Bend, our plan is to repurpose that building and utilize it as a pre-K center. And that helps us relieve some space needs at other campuses and helps us be maybe a little bit more efficient with that program. And also, so I'm going to get to PRISMs. PRISM's next on the list, but I'm going to save that for just one second. But wellness school, mental health is becoming more and more of a need, and there seems to be a gap there. And our wellness school, initially, our pilot may look like a school within a school, but it will be able to provide the students who need extra support, that extra support, and also not fall behind on classwork while they're receiving that extra support. on the mental health side. So excited about the wellness school, and that's inside. Funding for that to make that happen this year as a pilot is in this budget. And so PRISMS is very exciting. PRISMS is virtual reality, and it's not games. I mean, this is you're able to demonstrate and enhance lessons with virtual reality. And I don't know if anyone knows this, but I was on the physics team at Humble High School. So y'all probably do know that, knowing me and my love for physics. But seeing some of the capabilities with this, we would have a competition in physics, and we'd have to have all the resources and the time and the space. And with some of the capabilities with this program, you can do that every day, and not only try to solve a real-world problem, but also look at how those formulas work from a different perspective. So on the next slide, we're going to give a little bit more detail on PRISMS.
Yeah, I thought the board might want to see just the,
Hello, I'm so glad you're here. We just had a nasty avalanche that took out our town's entire power grid. Your job is to go down to Auriga to get the crew and bring them back so they can fix our grid and restore power to our town.
so PRISMS launched Algebra 1 in '21, and they are now, I believe, also have geometry and Algebra 2. They're working on calculus. They have chemistry. They're working on physics and biology and middle school math. And the presentation we had from the founder, who graduated from MIT and who is a teacher herself, was phenomenal. It really was. And it immerses kids in real life issues that use the math that they're supposed to be learning so that they have long-term memory of the purpose and the way that it works, not just, here's the formula, here's how you fill it in, now do the test, okay, now move on. This really changes the way that they learn math, and it's really exciting. So we're going to pilot next year, I believe, 33 classrooms across the district. Teachers will get to choose whether or not this is something they would like to do first, and Ann Johnson and her team are working on this as we speak. And we will have the inventor and teacher of PRISMS actually at convocation and sharing some of the information about why and how and all of the ways that people actually learn math and science and how they're not accomplished in your typical approach, and the reason why she has created this and moved it forward. And she's really amazing, and I think she'll be inspirational to our teachers. So
I thought my TI-83 was pretty cool, but I'm very jealous of the PRISMS. All right, so also inside the budget is safety, providing funding for safety. Flock cameras, if you're not familiar with what flock cameras are, those are cameras that have license plate recognition capabilities, which if a license plate gets tagged, a license plate that is already being prioritized or noted by police, then if that license plate's detected on our property, then it alerts the police. So hopefully prevents someone who's maybe already committed a crime to doing that again. So excited about being able to provide the funding to continue invest in the safety of our people and buildings with safety improvements here. Also, as we do have just regular old cost of doing business. I don't know if anyone else has felt this personally at home, but electricity, water, those are costing more. And so the budget we're preparing to provide funding for those increases. And as we, we've almost completed our 2018 bond program. We have added new buildings. Now with the new Bond 22 program, we're going to be improving our facilities more. So providing the funding to be able to protect those investments and insure those, which cost more. And also make sure that we're accommodating department needs, annual maintenance needs. So the numbers guy hasn't given you a number the entire night so far, and it's a little bit difficult right now because there is so much pending legislation. So I feel a little bit like weather forecast here, but we know that we expect more funding. When we know that, whether we know that before the time that we adopt our budget or we know that after, we have a good idea. And you may be looking at the potential of $18 to $35 million in recurring revenue and say, anyone could come up with that number, that range right there. But that's if every pending piece of legislation passed, and that's if nothing passed. So that's where we're at right now. And again, we're still early. We're new. As things progress through the legislative session, we'll make changes there. And one thing that we're going to have to just continue to track, like I mentioned, is that attendance. I know I say this, everyone probably is tired of hearing me talk about attendance, but attendance will still drive our funding for the next year. So that is a primary concern. If you notice this, 95% attendance pre-COVID, and right now we're at about 92.81%. And that's not necessarily a huge percentage, but that small percentage on a big number, our 49,000 students, amounts to a pretty significant change there.
Quick question. So when we changed and bumped up from a 3% raise to 4% raise, the funding was coming from a slight incremental change in attendance. I don't remember what that number.
92.58 was that number.
Okay, so we're ahead of that number.
We are, and so that's where the balanced budget, we're tracking.
That's good. That's what I wanted to know. I wanted to make sure that we weren't using fund balance and that we met our expectation.
Yep. And the 200 new students, we expect more than 200 new students, but last year we built the budget on 49,308, and this year we're expecting 49,508. So we're going to have more than 200 students, but we already have a plan for, this is the net difference of from the last budget to this budget. Okay, so where we're at with projections, again, we think we're going to land somewhere between $18 and $35 million in new recurring dollars. The biggest line item in the budget right now is our compensation improvement plan. That amounts to about 12.5, and then all of our safety, innovation, cost of doing business is 3.7. And I want to remind everyone that, yes, that 12.5 is a large number. Overall, on our budget, salary and benefits accounts for 85% of our total budget. So that's why there's such a difference in proportion there. And then, as I mentioned, some of those double staff classrooms, the state comp ed dollars that we're using for those initiatives, and just overall campus initiatives inside the budget, and ensuring that we have the funding for special education. All that, you don't have to do the math because we don't know how we're starting exactly, but it will equal a balanced budget. That's always our goal, to make sure that we're fully utilizing all of our dollars right now for the students today. And so we fully expect to be able to present a balanced budget when we get to June adoption. So where are we right now in the process? This is our first budget workshop. I hope that by May we can see some more clarity with legislation. We have another budget workshop in May. We'll also be able to provide more details on compensation and everything else that's in the budget. And then it looks, if this is again where we may not still know exactly, you remember last legislative session, we didn't know if we were going to get virtual funding until I think it was the third special session in August, which we had already adopted a budget preparing to continue virtual education in June. So June, we're July 1 fiscal year, so June 13th is potential budget adoption. And again, for that next budget workshop, look to be able to present more near final recurring expenses, the near final staffing and compensation recommendations, and also bring in the one-time. Today we're only talking about recurring expenses, but again, we do have a healthy fund balance, so some one-time budget submissions could be presented to utilize some of those dollars, and also get into some benefits recommendations in the May budget workshop, and then again, position and stipend review as well. So with that, are there any questions?
Mr. Beatty, yeah, well, just ballpark, okay, well, two questions, but one you could, I'll defer. Just ballpark, how much will we need to find if we want to, in terms of budget dollars, will we need to find to go to a 4% increase instead of 3? How many additional dollars will we need to?
I would say if we went from the 3% to the 4%, rough would be about $3.5 million.
Okay, and then before, we'll have a finance committee meeting, I believe, before we have our next workshop. For that meeting, could you just, again, not precise, but ballpark, tell us what would we need to do to move some of our hourly paid, like say transportation and our special ed paras, to get us closer to, I mean, I like that we're number 2 in terms of starting teacher pay, but what will it take to get us closer to that, to be really competitive in some of those areas? And again, for the next finance committee meeting, I'm not asking you for a precise number, but just so we can have something to think about as to where we need to drive.
Rick and I are already working on all of the hourly pay increase recommendations, and so we have all of that information. We just didn't bring it to this particular one because we actually just finished it today. And so Rick was going back to do some calculations for some increases. We'd love to see nobody under $12. We'd love to see transportation at $20. So we have a lot of things in the works that we're still working on.
And actually what you saw tonight has a placeholder. We haven't reconnected, but I have a placeholder for some of those initiatives that we had talked about early on.
But we might be a little over your placeholder, so.
Well,
We could have $35 more million of revenue.
There's a reason we didn't invite you to the meeting.
Well, and in that same vein, I know y'all probably are working on all of this, but just to make sure that we do here at the next budget workshop, so even looking at making sure that line, and I know you're really good at this, Rick, the line for seasoned teachers, that we're still in line with other districts to make sure that we're increasing in those areas as well. And also, one area, we have openings in our police department, and I think, I know we've offered more pay, but what else can we look at in that space as well? Sometimes you hear about things like Marshall Program. I just had a Texas Commission on Law Enforcement board meeting last week, asked a few questions about that, and essentially it was designed for school districts that don't have a police department, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are a couple of school districts that actually have it, but their police departments either just have a chief or like they have 3 police officers. It's not to say you can't do it, but we do have openings, and I'm just trying to think of incentive ways for us to fill those openings and something to consider.
We didn't go into the detail of some of that, but we are tracking some of that, and
Okay.
So there are some things that if you get closer to 35 million are more possible than if you're at 18 million. So part of what you're seeing tonight is because we have no indication of where we are, and we will present a balanced budget, and we're not going to spend beyond our means. And so if it is indeed 18 million, then the things we put up there, like special education teachers, a 3% increase, dyslexia teachers, those are the very highest priorities that get us into what we can afford. If we start moving toward the $35 million number, even if it's 25 million, then we're going to bring in all this next tier of stuff that would be our next level of ideas and priorities, which includes things like a program for a cadet program that our police department has moved forward, which really resembles Rick's apprentice program for teachers. So we have a lot more things, but we don't know if we can afford them yet. So that's the difference you're seeing.
And then I really like how you shared your timeline. One thing I just want to touch on, it's in the same vein as well. You know, with the superintendent, for instance, with her contract, you know, when we have a schedule out for the year and we're talking about what's going to be on the agenda, that was already on the agenda for May. Okay, so it wasn't June, it was already on the agenda for May. But after conversation, like, well, there's an opportunity here to move it up to April. I mean, if you think about that and how that works, this board that's sitting here, we set the goals for the superintendent. We evaluate those and assess those in a school year. And so if we extend the contract for an additional year, it is based on this school year and this board that is in place. And then we have an election coming up, May 6th, and that board, you know, that particular board will set goals for superintendent, and we will assess and evaluate throughout the year. So I just want, you know, as we're doing this, I know a lot of the work behind the scenes even has to do with evaluations of teachers and principals. There's so many things happening. Just wanted to kind of speak to that a little bit, just so people understand what that process looks like. And I guess that's my 2 cents on that. But you agree? And honestly, you know, future boards, I don't know how far, you know, this goes, but I do think boards really should make sure that that is done April or May, honestly, evaluating the superintendent's performance. So anyway, any other comments or questions for Billy? Mr. Beatty? Yes.
Just a quick question. So virtual learners, how do we, in terms of attendance, how are they marked? How does that occur, right? I mean, we know when a student is arrived at school, right? They're checked in. How do you do that with virtual learning? How is that tracked?
You want me to give this a shot, Terry? So I have, it's up to you. Okay, so you have to prove the engagement. And so right now, when we decided to move forward with virtual instruction, we switched our entire district-wide attendance procedure to that every student is marked absent to start with, and then we mark them present after attendance, where this was totally new. Before that, we had always marked every student present and then marked them absent. So what that does is if you have a field trip or something where maybe you don't necessarily start off in campus with the traditional attendance process, then there could be some missed attendance there. So right now there's pending legislation that would benefit us and remove that requirement so that we can go back to our prior attendance procedures. So excited about that legislation if it makes it all the way through.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know, Mrs. Parker, do you want to speak on, I know we talked about the pilot program. You know, you and I were just in Austin. Would you like to share a little bit on that? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
The thought that was on my mind is about the timing of our next workshop is going to be really good because it'll be at the end of the legislative session. So session ends on Memorial Day, so that'll be May 29th, and our next meeting is May 23rd. So much of the work of the Texas legislature will have taken place at that time. But go ahead, please.
Now, I was just going to say, you brought up the pilot about the wellness school.
Yep.
Ms. Parker and I did our due diligence. We went to Austin, and we had conversations with lots of our legislators about that, and they all seemed very open to the idea, and Representative Cecil Bell actually said he wanted to be more involved in that as well. So hopefully we can help with the coffers as much as we can on that end, and,
So, yeah,
you know, because it's really important work, and so we're all in it together.
Thank
I
you.
guess is my point. Yes, go ahead.
So, and I really would like to publicly thank State Representative Cecil Bell for meeting with us. He really took a good bit of time, and also Representative Cunningham, Senator Creighton. It was just a really good experience, but particularly Representative Bell spent a quality amount of time with us listening to the information about the pilot.
Yeah, Madam President, I also want to thank one of our parents from Bear Branch, Jason Pinto. I mean, he's like a lobbyist. I mean, he's just done such a great job in this area, and I hats off to him for all the hard work. He's kept us informed. He's been working with Dr. Fagan on all he's done, the people he's meeting with. So he has just done a yeoman's job as far as helping to push this forward. So I just want to publicly thank him for all his hard work.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Beatty.
thank you.
Moving to our closing items, are there any topics for future board business? Seeing none, the time is 7:21 PM. This meeting is now adjourned.